What's up, guys, and welcome back to my art channel and my art series where I share some art pieces with you guys throughout my career. And today we have a very special piece, and I know I say that all the time, and a very awesome piece, and a piece I really enjoy that I've made in the past, which I've also said in every other video, but this piece is very special to me. And one funny thing about this piece is I've tried to start this art channel 3 different times, and each time the first episode and the first video of that channel was with this piece. This piece is always one I wanted to showcase first as my skill in line work, my creative ideas, overall what I want my imagery to look like and what colors I use and how I use the colors and just the overall vibe. I think this piece stylistically is me entirely, and today we have a very special showcasing of Hook Chomp City. And for many reasons it's called Hook Chomp City, but like always, let's start at the sketch phase and we'll get more into the details with the fully rendered image at the end. Stay tuned and let's get it. All right, so for the sketch phase, it looks very, very good. I think I have a lot of very solid shapes, not too many scribbled lines or copy pastes. You can see I really knew where I wanted everything to go. And I remember this piece, I did it a couple of years ago, but I remember this piece was just flowing. Like I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Filling the space wasn't hard. I was in my flow state for this piece. And you can see that in the sketch phase, there's not a whole lot of things that I really took a second thought to in comparison to a fully rendered to line work phase. Everything's pretty much the same all through and through. Overall, the sketch phase looks really good. So without further ado, let's move to the line work phase. Of course, as always, the line work phase is my favorite part, no matter what I'm making, when I'm making it, whatever you want to say. The line work is my favorite part, and overall I think this came through really, really well. Everything fits in there really, really well. Nothing overlaps too much. There's a lot of open spaces here and there, not a lot I should say, but in comparison to most of my work, there's a lot of open spaces and it's well utilized with the very condensed and filled spaces. And overall this looks just really cool, and I'm really, really proud of this line work. I did a really good job fully rendering this. Overall, I'm really hyped on it. Let's get to the fully rendered image and really talk about all the specifics in this piece, and there's so much to talk about, so let's get right into it. Hook Chomp City, ladies and gentlemen. Check that out. Such beautiful colors, well use of space, so many vibrant colors. We got a lot of greens and pinks and blues and yellows and purples. So much to talk about this piece. So I think I'm just going to start in the bottom left and kind of work my way through. There's so many things intertwining and combining here. So bear with me on this one, but this is definitely one of my favorites and well thought out and creative pieces that I've made. So starting at the bottom left, we have this tube, like this Mario tube. It has some like handles, like a deadlift handles, like in a weight room. This tube is like split open in the middle where this mouth is, and in the middle is this heart. So you could assume it's the tube's heart getting punctured by that tooth, which is a cool little detail. And this tube is being held up by those handles by a spear that's kind of heading more to the right side of the screen there. You can see we have another hole here where his tongue's coming out of, apparently getting pierced by the spear, up and around this needle point that goes up into here, which we'll talk about later, around this vein that goes up into this triangle, which we'll talk about later, and hooked on this little ring which is attached to that dude, which we'll also talk about later. But overall, this heart's taken some sufficient damage. You can see it's broken there in half, which is pretty cool. Overall, I think that looks really, really cool. What's coming out of this tube, you may ask, is this giant green smoke monster. You can see it coming out of the bottom of the tube there, and this giant green smoke monster's got a mouth there, also got a heart of his own that's also taking some sufficient damage. But coming out of some of these holes in the smoke are these like stemmed eyeball things. So it's like a rod, but it holds the eyeball. You can see that eyeball even has a mouth there, which is pretty cool. And as you know, that spear that we were talking about runs through the tube monster and into that eyeball rod, through that and into the second eyeball, coming out of the second hole with the eyeball rod. And I know this sounds so crazy, but it's so much detail in this piece. You can see it's got a little bone in there as eyeballs do, a mouth there as eyeballs also do, but that's the end of the spear there. So you can see it running from way left to way right, and it does a collateral damage through the smoke monster's eyeballs, which is cool. Talking about the smoke monster's mouth, he's smoking a little J, if you will, flying out his mouth, which is being lit by this sword tip. So this sword tip like broke off, but also has a flame to it, which is pretty cool. And that sword's also bent an upright into an L shape, more towards the right side of the piece. We see that also going through the green smoke monster's heart, which is cool as well. Lots of details here. I'm sure I missed a ton of stuff, but we got to keep it rolling. Moving up from the smoke monster is this like weird 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hold like plant beast. As you can see, it's coming out of this hole here on this guy. So it's, you can follow the blue line up and around and towards this, like, I don't even know what you want to call it. He's got a lot of orifices, if you will, and coming out of one of them is those like purple berries there, and those purple berries are being stabbed by that initial sword we were talking about, the sword lighter, but also just hanging down, which looks cool. They got little mouths. They're brothers, they're twins, they're triplets. Coming out of another one is this sword hand, and it actually cut this hand off right there, and that's the one actually holding the sword. So that's pretty cool. Little connection there. Another cool thing is I implemented some technology into this piece too, which was pretty cool. So this thing's like a flesh cyborg, and you can see those wires, lineless wires kind of wrapping around into this like insane antenna that's actually producing this giant pink thing, but we'll get to that. So that's really cool. It's like a cyborg plant flesh thing. He's got a really big tooth there, and it looks like the tongue is actually coming out of the tooth, so that's cool. So more towards the left side of the piece, so I'd say this is probably the focal point of the piece, is this giant rectangular monster in the middle. You can see he's getting stabbed by that cyborg dude right through the mouth. Look at that mouth. Oh my god, it looks so cool. So he's got a lot of things going on, this rectangle guy. So he's also producing this cyborg monster, if you will, coming out of that hole right there, and he's also producing this guy who's taking a bite out of this triangle, but this rectangle is also getting a bite taken out of him. So you can see where the hooks and the chomps come into the title of this piece. Hook Chomp City. Lots of hooks, lots of chomps. But this rectangle's guy's got a lot going on within himself too. So he's got a hook actually hanging down right there, you can see, like a fish hook, and that's actually skewering that initial eyeball from that green monster at the bottom, which is stabbing a little eyeball there, which is pretty cool. He's producing like this little sword coming out the bottom, which is like a chained sword cracked at the top, also stabbing one of those initial eyeballs, which is also pretty cool. And he's getting, I think I already said this, but just getting a giant chunk taken out of him by this like Phineas looking shape hooked on this keychain, which is pretty cool. A lot of stuff moving up towards the right, but we'll get to that. So more towards the left here. And sorry if I forget anything. If there's anything you noticed, even though I made the piece, I've forgotten. It's been many years. If there's anything you noticed, leave it in the comments below. What are some of your favorite parts of this piece that you noticed you think are really cool? Leave it in the comments below. But kind of being produced by this rectangle is like this weirdly shaped long nose dude, and he's looking to take a bite out of this triangle, but it looks like he got skewered by this pole here on his tooth, and his bottom tooth got skewered by this ring. So he ain't doing much of any biting. You can see this giant hook that's coming up from these two moon-shaped stuff that dudes are passing through this triangle and through this guy's nose, which is cool. His nose breaks off there. You can follow it up into this eyeball that's also coming through this guy, the Phineas dude, that's going up through the top of his nose. Like, again, there's so many things like intertwining, combining about this piece that I honestly am blown away by it, even to this day, and it's one I share with lots of people as one of my favorite pieces of all time, and it looks really cool. But moving more to the left here, we see where that rod comes from. That's rod's coming from this like green section of this circled like tube-shaped monster thing needle. You can see that needle from the beginning when we discussed, and in the middle it's got this like liquid green skin that's kind of has this poison, so it's shooting that poison into the heart there, but it also has a hole in it with a hand. That hand's holding a spear, and that triangle's tongue's wrapping around the spear, and the spear's going up through the tooth. So much stuff going on there. Moving more towards probably one of my favorite parts of this piece are these two moon shapes. As you know from my profile picture, I created a piece more recently than this one. It was highly inspired by this Hook Chomp City piece, and because of these two moons that I made, especially this one. If you can't tell, it looks very close to my logo. But anyways, we got the two moons up here. One moon on the left's got another moon on the inside, kind of coming out of these two holes, but that tongue hanging from is wrapping around that needle-shaped thing, and it's being stabbed by that sword from the hand that's coming from the other moon. And that moon also is the origin of the chain that leads to that chomping dude that's chomping the rectangle. So a lot of stuff going on through there. Oh, and it looks like that sword's actually in the mouth of this guy, and it's going through the head of that, through the rectangle, and becoming that sword right there. So I guess this rectangle wasn't the origin of the sword. This moon way up top was. Another cool thing about this moon is it has a brain coming out of the top of it. There's these loop chains are actually hooking these two moons together, so they're locked in together, which is pretty cool. And this smaller moon shape within this moon is producing this other blunt joint looking thing, and it's producing a lot of smoke up top because it's being cooked by this chain monster that produces fire. So you can see these two chains clipped to each moon and going through the brain of this guy. So much good stuff going on. But anyways, going through the brain of that guy, and it's producing a flame, which is actually cooking the ingredients of this J, if you will, and producing that really cool green smoke up top. So much stuff going on there. I'm sure I missed a bunch. But moving more to the right, we got this tooth that's in a moon shape, and it's going through this eyeball, which was... It looks like it's coming out of this part right here, but I feel like this eyeball is a part of something else. Probably this hole going up through the middle there and out through the top of that rectangle. But anyways, it's going through this like plant looking thing. And this plant's actually coming from the rectangle as well, moving up towards the right, and it's actually splitting open. You can see this blood like defying gravity leading from one of the tubes to the other. So it's like still connected, but not. And this plant, I think I was going for a plant here with following the green tube, is this like plant, like again, like a Mario plant with a giant mouth, and out this mouth's a little tube that eyeballs passing through. So that's a pretty funky looking plant, but also I love using that green color with that purple color, especially in this piece, because it just draws all the colors together. And honestly, my color choices here were phenomenal in my opinion, and I think I did a really good job. But more into the piece, we have the electricity coming from the initial cyborg looking monster, making this really cool, and look at that texture, those designs in there, really cool pink electric monster on the top right. That just looks awesome. And that thing's actually smoking some of that smoke coming out of that J right there, and you can see his mouth, and you can also see that spear tip, and that spear tip's actually coming from this hole. But if you follow down, where did it start? It looks like that chain kind of started here and wrapped around this eyeball. Oh no, it came out of the sword. So it came out of the sword end, wrapped around the eyeball, into the rectangle, out of the rectangle, around the plant there, into the plant, out of the plant, into the plant again, in the mouth of the electric, and out the top. So a lot of like zigzagging there with that chain. But overall, that is Hook Chomp City. So many cool things going on in there. If you want any prints of this piece, I'm selling prints of this piece on my imprint store. Link in the description. It should be in my bio to my link tree. Just click on store. You'll see this piece in there. Cop a piece. They look really cool on your wall, really cool on posters. Hook Chomp City, episode 10. I really appreciate y'all for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.